about. So I just want you guys to be clear on that, because as you guys, I hope, are aware, you have your first quiz tomorrow. Right? You're aware of that fact, I hope? Okay. So I want you to clarify that the quiz is going to be both of those things. It's the identify, but also the explain. Tell me what it is and why it's important. Okay? And, you know, frankly, the second part is the harder part. I mean, it's easy to find what it is. Why it's significant, that's a little bit harder, and that's what we're really going to be focusing on, okay? So let's make certain we do that. If you didn't do that, that's fine. If you also check your homework tonight, you do have the next section, which is Northern Europe, or the Renaissance, and that's chapter 1, section 2. Now that's actually not that many words. I think it's like 3, and one of them is William Shakespeare, so that should be pretty obvious. In fact, I think there's just 3 authors is all that it is. William Shakespeare, Miguel de Cervantes, and a painter, I need to say. I think it's, I forget who the other is. Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. Exactly. 1 to 2 sentences, that's it. And basically, I'm going to give you 7, you pick 5. So you don't actually have to answer all of them. So if there's one you're like, I don't know what that is, you can skip that. Now, if you don't know 3 of them, you're in trouble. But, you know, I'll just give you 2. Little variance there. Okay, so we did all this yesterday. And if you missed any of that, the video is on YouTube, so you can fix that. But we're moving on to the next part. And this is still the first section, by the way. I'm just a little behind schedule. That's okay. All right, so this is an easy slide. So there were 3 main causes of the Renaissance, and it was the Crusades, the patronage of Lorenzo de' Medici and other patrons, and the independence of the Italian city-states. What all that means. First off, the Crusades. Have you guys studied the Crusades at all? You know what that is all about? The Crusades were holy wars, specifically over Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the Holy Land where we had the founding of the 3 main monotheistic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So that area was important to 3 major cultural traditions, and control of it was very important for a multitude of reasons. For one, there's the religious prestige of having titles like Defender of the Faith. The second is money. Because if you think about it, tourism is a big moneymaker, no matter what time period you're talking about. And people are going to take pilgrimages to the Holy Lands. They're going to spend a ton of money while they're there. So whoever controls the Holy Lands is going to make a ton of cash. So for these reasons, and frankly more, these areas were fought over, and plus you just had the natural cultural class of crusaders. So inevitably, this meant that there was a lot of money to be had, but there's also a lot of money in transporting the crusaders. I don't know if you guys are aware, but one of the biggest jobs of the U.S. military is simply getting people from point A to point B. I mean, if you think about it, you've got to guarantee that soldiers are fed, soldiers are clothed, soldiers are where they need to be when they need to be there. That's a huge undertaking, especially for militaries the size we deal with in the world today. So all this money was going straight through Italy because that was the staging point for the Crusades. So there's an incredible amount of importance to simply these areas for the movement of people. The other thing is, a lot of the knowledge that was lost in Europe because of the burning of Rome and other Roman cities was still going strong in the Muslim world. There was a lot of communication between the Middle East and Europe throughout the Roman era. I mean, it was frankly one big empire. But with the collapse of the Romans, this knowledge, while it was destroyed in Europe, was maintained in the Middle East. And part of Islam is actually the seeking knowledge. That's a big part of the faith, is the maintaining of knowledge and the sort of scholarship, especially under the great Muslim empires like the various caliphates, and then, of course, the Turkish empires. But anyways, I digress. So this knowledge was preserved, and with the Crusades, it sort of reconnected back to the Europeans. They started bringing works that had been lost. and are going to reintroduce these sort of new ideas. Because remember, the Renaissance is all about new ideas, but it's inspired by antiquity, by the Romans and the Greeks. So it's added a kind of fuel for this creativity. Thirdly, whereas many of the places in Rome collapsed, Italy has never really been that unified to begin with. I mean, for one thing, the geography kind of breaks up the various cities into like their own little kind of fiefdoms. And secondly, there's really kind of an identity when it comes to being Italian as being your city-state first. Like, people from Italy tend to tell you that they're from their city-state first. So they say, I'm from Rome, or Milan, or Florence, or wherever. Unless I'm Italian. Now, today, with globalization, might go more Italian, but even so, like, I remember whenever I was in high school, like, 20 years ago, there was an Italian exchange student that I hung out with named Filippo, and he was from basically Rome, but he was a Roman. No big deal. But it was interesting because he didn't say Italian, he said Roman. So, well, hey, question. I have my hand in my head. Okay, so that's kind of that explained. This map shows kind of how everything was broken up in the Dark Ages, Age of Crusades, and how Italy really was the staging point into the Byzantine Empire. I don't have time to go over the Crusades, but oh man, there's all kinds of crazy, awesome shenanigans that happened with the Crusades. Like, people just got really confused, doing the wrong thing. Remember I was talking about logistics, moving armies around? Well, there was kind of this colossal failure of this one crusade, and they got hungry and decided to, sack a Christian town, which sacking basically means you burn everything and steal everything that's not nailed down. Because, that's what the crusades were about, is killing other Christians. But lots of mistakes were made, and it was kind of a giant disaster. Anyway, you can find all kinds of neat stuff on it online. We don't have time. But another thing I want to take a second was show you some architecture. I'm going to do this throughout various sections, as with the different places around the world, but there's really a big change in sort of we'll say, the Romanization of Europe. In fact, you guys know the word romantic? That actually comes from the Roman. So what we mean when we say romantic is not we mean Roman-like. That's actually what it means, Roman-like. So this is a Romanesque thing. Now, I you guys have studied Roman architecture, but they love them some arches. That's like symmetry. It's another big deal. But arches, Do you guys know why arches are so cool? What's that? Well, that is true. You're right. But let's talk about something a little bit more physical, right? Something physically neat about arches, right? So, I don't know if you guys ever tried to make a sandcastle as a kid? Have you tried making arches in sand? Doesn't work, does it? Why? It's so acid, right? Why? Because there's a big freaking hole in it. So why do we put a hole in a wall to the whole thing not collapse? What's that? There's four things around. Okay, it depends on the material, doesn't it? Because here's the thing: if you put a hole in something, it makes it weaker, right? Kind of, yeah. But here's the thing: there's a way of making it so strong. That's an arch, right? Because think about it. You're building like this, yeah? And so if you have something like this and it's unsupported, what are they going to want to do? It'll fall this way, right? So you have it so that they are trying to fall in, but they touch, they can't go anywhere. They hold each other up, right? In fact, the traditional way they make arches, you have one stone in the middle that acts as a downward force, that's why it's usually bigger and heavier. That's called a keystone. And so, anyway, and what that does is it causes the whole thing to push down and in as opposed to out. So you can actually have freestanding stones in an arch that won't fall down unless you put some severe pressure on them because of the weight that they down and forward. In fact, if you do that but in two directions, you just create a dome. So it allows you to have these big windows without having structural problems, right? So here's the thing: that's old-fashioned thing. That's easy. But the Romans, in fact, they use the arch in all of their architecture. So here on the left, we have a Gothic cathedral, which is during the Middle Ages, the late Middle Ages. And its purpose was to have really tall buildings. The thing is, it's still pretty blocky. I mean, let's face it, it looks pretty Lego, doesn't it? By the way, do you guys know that building? It's a cathedral. Specifically, it's a cathedral in France. Disney made a movie about it. Notre Dame. You were going to say it I would say that's Notre Dame, right? And it's pretty neat. If you look at it, it's got all these different flying buttresses and reinforcements to make this huge, tall building that would have just, like, awed someone in the Middle Ages. Because the thing is, like, the buildings most people would have been in really small. Cathedrals are just, like, so huge. It's like, oh my God, how is this thing standing? It's amazing. This, on the other hand, is a Renaissance tower. In fact, you guys know the Leaning Tower of Pisa? That's another example of a Renaissance pillar. But you see all these arches? You see how kind of light this thing looks and airy? You can see, like, through the building, it's amazing. So it's and this is how it's stocky and foreboding. It's this change in sort of aesthetic, what we're going for here. Anyways. That is Lorenzo de Medici. You guys did stuff on him, homework. I don't really go into it in too much detail. But no, he is one of the greatest patrons of the arts. He was the guy who really made a lot of stuff possible in Florence. Now, it wasn't just him, it was his family, but he's sort of known as the big guy, the guy who did all this stuff. And then one other point, you remember how we were talking about the Silk Road? How the movement of goods through it was what was bringing all this wealth into Italy and these other staging points, right? I wanted to point out that saying the Silk Road makes it seem like it's literally one road all the way across Asia. It's not. It's actually a series of trade routes. It was groups moving together because there's a whole bunch of basically barbarians, various Turco-Mongolian peoples who were living on the steppes of Central Asia, who would raid the ever-living Jesus out of groups of merchants. So what happened is they started traveling in groups for safety, and along the way, various sort of pit stops grew up. You had temples, you had schools, you had hospitals, soup kitchens, baths, all these things developed along the Silk Road and helped to transfer culture in one of the greatest migrations of people the world has ever seen. It's actually kind of astounding to see how that influenced the cultures of the world, which we'll get to later. But anyways, remember how we were talking about why was the Renaissance significant? Well, it changed the way people looked at the world, for one thing. You might recall that I said in the Middle Ages, pretty much philosophy was life sucks and then you die. Religion was the most important thing, because this world is transient, it's temporary. It moves on. What you really need to focus on what happens in the ever after, because that's much longer. So don't worry about what happens to you right now, just do your job and don't worry about it. But the thing is, the Renaissance changes all that. We want to understand more about the world, we want to push the limit, which means understanding of how the universe works is going to change. For instance, you've got dudes like Galileo. You've got Magellan and Christopher Columbus physically exploring the world. You've got new scientific theorems. Sort of taboo subjects start coming available, such as how does the body work? I don't know if you guys are familiar with medieval medicine, but their basic idea was there were 4 fluids in your body, and if they were out of balance, you got sick. That or was witchcraft. Like, if you went and saw a doctor, they would try to figure out how to get your fluids in balance, which sometimes it worked, more often than not it didn't. In fact, it could actually hurt you. For instance, one of the more infamous practices was exsanguination, or bleeding, where they cut you open and let out blood because you have too much blood. Of course, that kills you if you do it too much. So it didn't really help people that much. On the other hand, dudes like Anthony von Leeuwenhoek started studying how blood moves to the capillaries and understood that's not just kind of hanging around, it's actually a fluid that moves nutrients around the body. I mean, this is the beginning of sort of modern medicine. Lastly, there is an emergence in viewing the world in a more non-secular way. In essence, people looking at the world and saying, why focus just on that right? Let's focus on what's here and now. These guys are called humanists. In particular, they focus their attention on 4 different philosophies, if you will, different subjects, which included history, grammar, poetry, and another one that's a little silly, we use sometimes, called rhetoric. You guys know what rhetoric is? Sure, fantastic. For instance, I presume you might have heard sometimes of asking a rhetorical question. What is a rhetorical question? You guys know? What's that? Yeah, question that doesn't need to be answered because it's obvious. I mean, who wouldn't want this? You know? It's not actually a question so much as it's just restating your point. Rhetoric is a form of debate. In fact, if you look at those main topics, they're all very important if you want to be a leader or a politician. Let's go through them. Because some of them are more obvious than others. Rhetoric, clearly. You want to be able to argue your point if you want to be a leader. Poetry? Why poetry? Well, consider this. Look at our current political candidates, right? What does the media have to say about the way that people speak? Is there a lot of time spent talking about how someone says something? There absolutely is. There's a great deal of time spent criticizing candidates because of how they say things. You know, we put a lot of emphasis on speaking well, and for God's sakes, if you look at previous presidents, President Obama is an amazing public speaker. Compared that to George Walker Bush, who couldn't open his mouth without saying something stupid. And you can see why people are very critical of him. So even then, how you speak things was incredibly important. And believe it or not, studying poetry actually changes your vocabulary as well as the cadence of your speech in such a way that it becomes more pleasing to the ear. Have you ever wondered why we study poetry in school? That is why. Next, history. What can history tell a potential leader? Yeah.
What to do and what not to do.
Exactly. Plain and simple. I think you got it. So we have poetry, we have rhetoric, and we have history. What about grammar? Do we care how good someone's grammar is when they're trying to be a leader? Yeah, absolutely do. For goodness sakes, you can have a post about kittens on the internet, and if someone misspells something, oh my God, people go crazy. Oh my God, you misspelled something, you're a fool, rage, salt. The fact is that we are very, very biased about mistakes when it comes to someone who's in the public eye. Another thing that, again, this is kind of hilarious to me as well, corruption, right? Things not working the way as they're intended was a major problem in the Middle Ages, in particular in the church. The church, who was supposed to be there to serve the people, really existed more to act as sort of its own de facto kingdom. The church controlled more land, wealth, and power than any other kingdom. And the fact is, there was a lot of priests who simply joined the church because they wanted money, power, prestige. For instance, it was not uncommon for the Pope to have several bastard children, which is kind of against that whole vow of celibacy thing, but I digress. The humanists pointed that out, usually in the form of farce, because if you flat out said the church is corrupt, odds are good you're going to be branded a heretic and either burned at the stake or tortured and then burned at the stake. So you don't want to do that. Next up, the Renaissance was the golden age of art for Europe in many ways. If you look at artists that are famous in European history, a lot of them are Renaissance painters. For instance, you guys know the whole Ninja Turtles thing, right? Donatello, Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo. All those guys are Renaissance painters. And I'm going to show you real briefly some of their best works. But we're going to kind of move through it fast, so hold on to your hats. Here we go. First up, don't forget I'm recording, so you can come back to this. First off, there's a couple brief things. Now, remember, you guys have already done a lot of this, so you don't need to do it again. You don't need to write all this stuff down. If you're having trouble staying with me, don't forget, you don't have to write everything down. If you're not, you're probably writing too much. So if you still want to make certain you get everything, you can go back on the YouTube video and catch that. But otherwise, just kind of ease off a little bit. Don't forget. Okay, back to this. So Leonardo is most infamous for not only his paintings, but really for his inventions. I mean, obviously, the Mona Lisa is the painting everybody loves. The thing is, the dude was also a genius. He invented all kinds of crazy nonsense, and actually dabbled things like herbs and biology, and even things like anatomy. Michelangelo is actually best known for his sculptures, believe it or not, though his most famous work is most likely the Sistine Chapel. And Raphael is mostly known for the School of Athens, which I'll show you here in just a moment. But first, Leonardo's drawings. Do you have any idea what this thing is on the left? It is not a catapult, but that's a solid guess. It is an airplane, yes. It didn't work, but it was his idea. The thing I can see where it says that's are actually wings that you're supposed to get. Wow, it didn't work. But another thing you might notice, if you look at the writing, he wrote backwards. It was a way of protecting his secrets. He also was found to actually make mistakes purposely in his drawings so that if anyone was trying to copy them, it wouldn't work. Over here on the right, of course, you know what that is. It's a skull, but it shows the blood vessels and things like that. Again, he dabbled in a lot of different things. This is the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. That was Michelangelo's probably greatest work. And what's interesting about this, I don't know if you're aware, each one of these scenes is actually one of the stories of the book of Genesis. So you get the entire book of Genesis on the ceiling. It's pretty neat stuff. And then lastly, the School of Athens. Now, Athens, as you guys know, was one of the Greek city-states, most famous for philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. The school was the university in Athens where people learned philosophy. The thing that's interesting about this is, frankly, this painting is really a bit of fan fiction. Because one, he didn't know what it looked like, he just kind of made something up. And two, he painted himself in it. That's Raphael right here. He also painted Michelangelo and Leonardo, sort of his mentors. Because what he was trying to show in symbolism is that these new artists and philosophers are sort of carrying on the traditions that the early philosophers put into place in Greece. So it's sort of like they're passing the torch. No. This is something we do need to go over. And it's the last slide, by the way. How-to books. One of the important things about raising one's station in a feudal society is how to make an impression. Remember, all power in a kingdom comes from the king. And so if you want to raise yourself, your station, you need to impress not just the king, but also any of his underlings, because it's a hierarchy. So if you're a very low-standing noble, in order for you to raise your station, you have to sort of impress your boss, and then so on and so forth up the line. Eventually, you can find yourself in wildly different positions. There are stories of, women impressing the king and becoming queen. They went from a relatively low position in society to the highest you can pretty much get. Now, how do you do that is a little tricky. You have to learn. You have to have a tutor. And so Baldessari Castiglione wrote a book called The Book of the Courtier. Court in medieval society is where all the nobles and everybody would meet. So in essence, how do you go and be a person in court? They had lessons on how to eat, how to greet someone on various stations, how exactly to bow, how to fence. Basically, anything you should need to know to be a courtier. The other famous how-to book, which we're actually going to read part of this week, in fact, we're going to read some of it tomorrow, I think it is The Prince, written by Niccolo Machiavelli. Now, Machiavelli's The Prince is sort of lambasted in history, because it's not a very nice book. I don't mean that it's crass or crude, but rather the philosophy is seen as kind of inhuman. Because his philosophy of being a good king was you must do whatever it takes to stay in power. Now, to be fair, how much he actually believed that is debatable. But in the book, it pretty much states that you are clearly the best person for the job, so whatever you need to do to stay in power, you should do. If that means being super nice and helping everyone all the time, that's what you should do. If it means holding people's children ransom and killing them so you stay in power, then that's what you do as well. It takes morality out of everything. You just do what's necessary. That's it. And so that sort of ruthlessness is called Machiavellianism. And so basically, that how-to book became sort of an advice book on rulership for centuries. To this day, the prince is still studied as a, how to be a good leader. Because some of the things are also just about a balance. The example I gave is like kind of hardcore, but what about when it comes to being well-spoken? Like, what's the difference between being kind and being weak? Machiavelli writes about that. So that sort of issue which you might face as a leader, he talks about. Because to be frank, you have that situation. If you're, say, for instance, a shift leader at a business, right? You're in charge of some employees, and you're nice to them all the time, they are going to take advantage of you like crazy. They're going to walk all over you, and it's like not show up for shifts or show up late. Like, oh, come on, we're buddies, that sort of thing. So you have to be a little harsh, but at the same time, you don't want to be so harsh that no one ever wants to work with you. You have to have a balance, right? So that's what he talks about. Okay? All right, for homework tonight, section 2. Okay? So just like you guys had the thing at the end of section 1 with the terms and names that you guys did last night, do that for section 2. And tomorrow's quiz will be over the terms for section 1 and 2. So if we open up the old textbook, I know I should put this on. Okay, and we go to chapter 1, section 2. It is on page 51. The terms you have are Utopia, William Shakespeare, and Johann Gutenberg. So it's just those 3. So those 3 plus the 6 from the first one, which, as a reminder, are humanism, secular, patron, perspective, and vernacular. Okay? That's a total of 9 terms. I'm going to take 7 of those for the quiz tomorrow. And the quiz, again, is going to be to identify what it is and explain why it's important. Yes, ma'am?
If we switch to Renaissance, can we identify it as the rebirth in art and learning?
That's really what it is.
Oh.
Yeah. So, if you have, it's the rebirth of arts and learning, and then explain why that's significant, and you're good. Okay?
And then something complicated.
Do what?
Some page 52.
I think so. Double check. 51, excuse me. Yes. Oh, yeah, it does. Keep them all together. It's terms and people. It's basically chapter 2 assessment, part 1.
So, like, it says terms and names.
That's it.
So, like, last time we did communication.
Correct. This time you have those 3. All right. That's it, guys. That's it for me today. I'm going to probably not really skip section 2, but I'm going to move fast through it tomorrow because really there's not all that much there. There's a lot of extra stuff, but I really don't feel the need to give you extra. I think there's enough. So we'll go over what we need, and then we're going to take a quiz, and then I'm also going to have you guys read some of the prints, and that's partially going to be for homework. as well. I know it says on Wednesday no homework. That's if we get through everything. If we don't, then I'm sorry, you're going to use it. Okay, I think that's everything. So I'm not really sure how much time you guys have. I think it's like a minute or two. What's that? Yeah, humanities, sure. There we go. Yeah, the humanists and humanities. Well, yeah, well, there are two different things. The humanists study the humanities, which are rather focused history of race. And you might remember, like I said, the significance of that is it was what was needed to change people politically at that time period. And frankly, today it's still important, just maybe not as, obvious. Because frankly, I think if some politician was like, I'm all about history, they would be lambasted for that. But it does provide some background information. Okie dokie smoky? Okie dokie artichoke? Awesome. All right, so one more time, just in case anybody needs this reminder, what you need to do for the quiz tomorrow, you will need a sheet of loose leaf paper. I will have the terms written on the whiteboard. And basically your job is to take 5 of the 7, write out what that item is or person, and why they are significant. So for instance, William Shakespeare was the most important author of the Renaissance. And part of the reason behind that is his language was sort of the popular language, not of what people spoke, but what sort of people aspired to. In fact, if you really study language of the era, Shakespeare was not how people talked at all. In fact, it was sort of that perfect speech that made him so famous. At the time, he was really just really prolific. People liked his stuff, and he wrote a lot. So that's one of the reasons why he's so famous. But he was also very political in his dealings. Obviously, the most famous place that we study here, Macbeth, Hamlet, and Romeo and Juliet aren't really that political. But if you look at some of the other ones, i.e. Julius Caesar, Henry V, all these different things, absolutely they're political. And so, in a lot of ways, he was a political commentarian as well as an author. So that's another way to answer that question. Okie dokie? Awesome. And then you throw that in, we'll be good. Yes? Yeah, but you really don't need that as much. That's fine. Although I will say this, this does explain really well why they're important. So, there's that. But remember, the actual questions tomorrow are 1 to 2 sentences. Don't give me a paragraph per person. 1, you won't have time for that. And 2, it's really not necessary. Now, I don't know if anyone has extended time on quizzes or tests, but I do need to know if you're using extended time for this, like now. And you need to tell Miss Wardrip so that she can prepare, or whoever the person is. I thought it was Miss Wardrip, maybe it's not, I'm not sure. Anyways, okay. All right, I'm going to close this out. I'll put it back up for you in a second, but I want to stop the recorder so I don't record a bunch of just silence.